Over to you, Vittal. Oh, let me bring up the slides. You're on mute, I believe.
I should be unmuted now. If you could share the slides, Jim.
All righty. Here we go. All right. Sorry, I have to rewind. There we go. Over to you, Vittal.
Thanks, Jim. Welcome, everyone, to our first of the series of panel discussions. This is a collaborative effort between ISSIP and Penn State University's Service Systems Engineering program. It's a fledgling one housed in the Industrial and Manufacturing Engineering Department. My name is Vittal Prabhu. I'm a faculty in the IE department at Penn State. And Jim Spohrer is my co-host. He's the sort of brains behind ISSIP. He's been involved with ISSIP for a long time. This is the first of the series of focus group panels that we will have on a series of industries within the vast service sector. And we will look at how these individual industry segments are transforming. And this, we believe, will give us some idea of how we can potentially engineer the 21st century service economy. Just to set the motivation for this, we are the first industrial engineering academic program in the world, started in 1908. I was not part of the department then, believe me. But many of our alums have gone on to have successful careers in services, even though they were all predominantly trained in the manufacturing sector, because the department was founded at the outset of the Industrial Revolution. So they come back and tell us, hey, look, you need to train engineers to also go work in the service sector because there are a lot of opportunities, lots of opportunities to improve productivity and customer service. That's the long and short of why we are doing this. And we have a great partner in ISSIP to launch this. Jim, if you could take us to the next slide. Yes, thank you. So if you take any large economy today, such as the US, over 80% of the economy is services. Okay? And healthcare, for example, is about 20% of our economy. And not too many of our graduates from engineering, especially industrial engineering, go to work in these sectors necessarily. At least we don't train them intentionally. Many of them have very successful careers and have made a tremendous impact in their careers. But can we do a better job of training them intentionally? If so, what are the kinds of things that we need to train the next generation of engineers if we were to really contribute to the 21st century service economy? So the six industries that we have chosen to focus on this year: healthcare, finance, education, retail and hospitality, supply chain and logistics, as well as energy and information tech. So what we'll do today is, of course, focus on healthcare. We'll start out with Jim giving us a brief perspective on computing, and then we will have a brief overview of our panelists, and they will give us their position statements. Jim, if you'd like to take over.
Yes, thanks, Vittal. Can you hear me okay?
Yep.
Great. And really excited to be here today. Thanks, Vittal, for creating this series and co-hosting it with me. We've got some amazing panelists who will introduce themselves shortly, but we've got expertise in enterprise transformation from Sunil, two MD doctors with lots of emergency room experience, as well as another expert on service systems. So really delighted that you all could join and present today. My job is just to be very, very brief and get you excited about the transformation coming to healthcare and maybe be a little provocative. So who hasn't heard about service robots? And as we think about the aging force in nursing, lifting patients can be very, very stressful. So it's amazing to watch the robot technology advance. Also, when it comes to augmenting people with expertise, I hope some of you have seen the AI digital twin of Reid Hoffman interviewing himself. Reid Hoffman, of course, famous VC in Silicon Valley, who started LinkedIn. But both of these advances, if you haven't seen, take a picture, screenshot of these two YouTubes here and go out and watch them, and you'll get a sense of some of the exciting advances that are happening in artificial intelligence that will have applications and implications for healthcare and all industries. Recently, I heard Jensen Huang, the CEO of NVIDIA, talk about the marginal cost of computing going to zero. And he talked about their H100 chip, which costs $250,000 each. And it replaces a data center, he said. And the cables, just the cables in the data center alone cost more than $250,000. So he's saying this chip is a bargain. And as the cost of computing goes down, what we're going to see is an explosion of new service offerings. Things that had required expertise in the past that were scarce are going to become more abundant. This is a great time to be an entrepreneur in healthcare or any industry if this technology can be harnessed appropriately. And just one other further provocation, NVIDIA has partnered with the Hippocratic AI to build these AI digital nurses. And the idea is you go to see your doctor, and some of us get like an email summary of our doctor visit. But imagine, and some of us get like the nurse calls and says, okay, I'm going to go over this with you. Well, imagine an AI nurse that contacts you and says, hey, I'm here to take you through the findings and answer any of your questions. And if you go out to this, take another screenshot and go out to this YouTube, you'll see one of the influencers I follow, along with Harvey, you're another influencer I follow, explain how this technology works and the implications and how it compares in some evaluations. So I guess all I really want to say is the cost of computing is going down over time, but the GDP per employee is going up. And it's a great time to think about industry transformation. I'm delighted that ISSIP has this series. I'm delighted that Vittal asked for this, and I'm super excited that we've got these great panelists. So without further ado, Sunil, over to you.
Great, Jim, thank you. And Vittal and team, thank you for the opportunity to come speak to the group. So a little bit about myself. I've spent a career developing technology and developing applications and platforms, largely in tech-enabled companies. I started my career in telecommunications, spent a number of years at Cisco Systems, where I led software development for Cisco's global services business, which is where I joined ISSIP and got engaged with Jim. After leaving Cisco, I sort of focused on healthcare and was fortunate to go work for United Health Group, where I led the digital experience for their OptumRx business, which is their pharmacy benefit management part. And that gave me a real glimpse into the healthcare industry and some of the opportunities and challenges from a really interesting vantage point, given that they're one of the largest players in the space. After leaving Optum, as Jim said, I went to a startup, a company called Waltz Health that's based in Chicago, where our mission was all about driving down the cost of healthcare. And Waltz is now commercially in the market space with a series of products that we can chat about offline. More recently, I just left Waltz to go be the CTO at a company called Direct Supply, which is also in the healthcare space, but a different part of the market. Direct Supply is a provider to long-term care facilities, and we sell everything from the way I call it, bananas to wheelchairs to long-term care facilities and everything in between. So a little bit of healthcare experience and some observations as I've gone through my own journey. So next slide, if you would, Jim. And I'll go through this pretty quickly. I think, if you think about some of the hurdles in our current healthcare paradigm, and this is, publicly available data, clearly cost and affordability, which is always forefront. There's a lot of healthcare technology challenges in terms of data exchange, having a full view of the patient. What do they share with you? Lots of examples of, even in the pharmacy space where I spent the bulk of my time in healthcare, you may know what the people are prescribed, but you don't actually know what they're taking over the counter, right? So there's lots of nuances there. And, because of the way the economics and the incentives of the system work, the patients aren't always at the center of care. They are in their appropriate care setting, but there's a lot that goes around to their care setting, right? And providers, physicians, and I know there's a couple of physicians on the panel here. I'd love to get their view, but one of the things I heard a lot from providers is there's never enough time to spend with the patient because you've got, the pressure of the number of patients you need to see, and everything that goes around that, right? So there's kind of it's not a straight line between the recipient of care, which is the patient, and the system, the economic and the provider system that provides that care. And that leads to a lot of challenges, one of which is the point of care is frequently misaligned with the cost of care, right? People tend to go to emergency rooms for sometimes the smallest of things, which is the most expensive point of care delivery. And again, that just feeds into the economic challenges and a lot of the things that tend to happen. Next slide, if you would, Jim. So, again, lots of practical challenges, some of which we've touched on. And in the spirit of time, Jim, I think I touched on some of this. We'll just go right to the next one. And, to be encouraged by everything that's going on, there's lots of mega trends that are happening in healthcare, right? Digital health revolution. Folks have heard of Teladoc, right? Teladoc came out with a bang through the pandemic. They've had some recent challenges, but, they continue to make momentum in the marketplace. Lots of value care models, and certainly the provider, the healthcare space, but also in the pharmacy space. We look at companies like, Capital RX that are looking to drive down the cost of prescriptions. Lots of population health management. My previous employer, United Health Group, is doing a lot of work in the space. And I think the other thing that's happening is a lot of consumerization of healthcare. You see companies like Oscar that are providing direct-to-consumer insurance. My old employer, Walls Health, the things that we're doing to drive down prescription cost and transparency, right? So lots of activity happening here. I think we're going to see a lot of change in coming years in this market space. And frankly, I think it's a very exciting place to be.
Fantastic, Sunil. Great overview. Everyone, including the other panelists, please feel free to use the chat to put questions for Sunil or any of us into the chat. We'll circle back with the questions after we've heard the position statements for the panelists. And I'm excited to turn it over to Harvey. I can use the slides you sent me, or you can just talk however.
No, we'll have you push the slide. So go to the next slide, please. So my name is Dr. Harvey Castro. I'm an ER doctor. I have about 20 years of ER experience. I feel blessed in that I've been able to wear many hats. At one point, I did over 30 iPhone apps. And at one point, there's this thing called ChatGPT, and I wrote a book on it back in 2022. And then fast forward, I've been honored just to be able to do a lot of things in AI, and including creating my own AI products and selling that kind of stuff. It's just been a lot of fun. So I'm able to combine my CEO hat, my doctor hat, and entrepreneur hat, and now my new hat is the AI. And so why am I so passionate about this thing? This one slide really captures it. Basically, it's a mother who had this child complaining of leg pain over 3 years. And over that 3-year span, mom went to about 17 different doctors, and no one could figure out what was wrong. And in fact, some of them told her, the mom, that the child was crazy, that it was on his head, nothing was wrong. Fast forward, mom took all of that information, MRI reports, different symptoms over the whole 3-year span, put it into ChatGPT, and ChatGPT came up with this diagnosis. Mom went to the neurosurgeon, and long story short, ChatGPT got it right. Next slide. And so when I look at this, this is usually like an hour talk, so I'm condensing probably like 80 slides here to about 3. So this one image really captures what I'm trying to talk about. It's leveraging AI plus human is always going to be better than the best human out there and the best AI out there. As a doctor, I'm having to take all this medical information, and this information is coming at me so quickly that I can't get it all so fast. In other words, a new article literally comes out every 40 seconds, and medical knowledge doubles every 30 days. Back in the 1950s, if I had to double my knowledge, it would take 50 years. So literally, I could take 20 years off, come back, and I was still a stellar doctor. But if I took 20 years off now, people would call that malpractice for touching a patient. And so I need something like GPT. I need something to help me get all that information and hand it to me. So personally, I'm creating my own AI agents where I'm able to go into the different journals, and it literally gives me all that information so I can keep up with medicine. Literally, I'm creating agents and different information where I'm leveraging AI. In the last 2 years, I think I have about 15 books on AI in healthcare and different types of AI. And I'm doing it because I'm able to leverage AI. But not only that, I'm taking my own personal books, putting them into my own AI, and able to have a conversation with myself to say, okay, I know I spoke about ethics and X and Y. Let's talk about this. And so I'm able to create more. And it's that combination of human plus AI. It's going to be better than just the best human out there, the best AI. Next slide. And so, as you see, this is kind of crazy. To me, it seems normal, but Jim looked at it like, dude, this is a lot. And the skinny is just a quick slide to just show you the different ways of using AI in healthcare. And so this was just for fun. I made this little cheat sheet that's on my LinkedIn. I put it in the chat. You're welcome to look at it and download it. But the skinny is just the different AIs and how to leverage in medicine and how to be able to do that whole thing that I just said is AI plus human is equal to more. And so I have about another minute left, and I just want to wrap up with saying, don't be scared of AI, embrace it, embrace change. I know that sounds crazy. Be a life learner. The more you know, the more you're going to understand, the more it's not going to be so foreign, and you're going to really embrace these tools. As I look at it in healthcare, obviously it's trillions of dollars that are going out the door, and we need to do something. It's taking over our GDPR to the point where I'm worried. The other part to this is I'm worried about as the population ages and new physicians are coming in, they're not coming in fast enough to supply the demand that's out there. And so pretty soon here, we're going to start hearing more horror stories of people dying in the emergency room, having things that should have been taken care of. So I really believe, I'll end with, AI plus human is going to be better. And I really believe we're in the near future, we're going to have a robot. And I know some of you guys will cringe, where that robot will look at you and say, oh, his hemoglobin A1C is this, his blood pressure is this. Hey, his voice alone, I could tell his blood is this. And so that will start happening. And the last thing I'll say is with our aging nurses, they're going to be throwing out their backs. I do believe a robot will help assist patients. So with that said, I'm going to cut it, and then thank you for your time.
Yeah, thank you, Harvey, very much. And before we go to Chris, I just want to put in a plug. You are one of the influencers I follow because not only do you embrace the future, so you're going at it like wild, learning, but you also share, and you do a fantastic job of sharing, not just in books, but online stuff, and you're generous with your time. Thank you so much for being with us here today. And now I'm going to turn it over to Chris. And Chris, I'm going to stop sharing so we can just focus on you.
Yeah, I'm the anti-slide guy.
Please.
I think that, panels and discussions
Go for it, Chris.
are most valued based upon the conversation. So I'm Chris. I'm an emergency physician. I practice at Penn State in Hershey, Pennsylvania, home of where you buy all your chocolate. Every Thursday I'm taking care of patients, and when I'm not doing that, I'm either being the Chief Medical Information Officer for our health system. Got about 8 hospitals and about, I don't know, 5 billion or so a year revenue, and about 3 million or so visits a year across our ambulatory sites. And then I get to work a lot with some of the really smart researchers at Penn State University and some centers we've developed in thinking about how healthcare delivery systems are created. How do we use AI? How do we use AI now? But really, how to use industrial engineering techniques to improve systems practice. And so, when I think about this AI, it's on such a hype cycle now. I'm like, and I'm a chocolate guy too. I'm like sick to my stomach from all the stuff that's just been jammed down my throat related to AI. There's a lot of hype out there. There's a lot of reality out there, but there's a lot of hype. I'm down with Harvey, but I'm not drinking the Kool-Aid quite as much as he is, because when you're in the business of this, you've got a lot of entrepreneurs out there that are trying to sell you stuff, and right now they're adding AI onto the title of everything they're trying to sell you. Okay, so there is a practicality inside of here, and this is where I'll agree that the knowledge of what AI is and how you go about understanding and use it is really going to be beneficial to you, whether you're doing the development or you're trying to have some discussions with developers associated with it. You can take and I got into this healthcare IT business stuff back when we actually used this thing. It's called a pen. For those of you who don't know it, we used to use this with paper, and we would write things down in cursive. By the way, they don't even teach cursive anymore, right? So you actually use these things, and think of the errors that we made with these, right? Then all of a sudden, magically, you have these laboratory information systems that, whoa, it's going to change the world because now all of your labs are automated and digital. It didn't do anything, right? Then you got these EMRs that have the promise of all this stuff. It's going to automate and they're going to talk with each other. 20 years later, we've spent billions of dollars on healthcare IT. And, you could argue there's some things improved, but it hasn't really improved to the way it is. I think now of AI as sort of the, EMR 25 years ago, where there's all this promise. And do we really actually take advantage of that promise? We have an opportunity to do that. I think it's air, and I think how we go about doing it is smart. And with panelists like this, I think with industry working together with academia, I think with some practical people who remembered all this sort of stuff, but also really value the person-to-person conversations. At the end of the day, healthcare is about people taking care of people. Yes, there's a huge cognitive burden, no doubt about it. There's a lot of data out there that can help you do it. And I think AI will be part of it. And, we could slowly into it with some machine learning activities or some of the other technologies that are a little bit more proven. But I think we're going to be able to make a difference inside of here. And I'm really interested to have sort of that banter back and forth with the panelists and those who are visiting. So thank you for having me come visit today.
Thanks, Chris. And yeah, it's people helping people, and we use tools like pins or AI. And the newer tools, yeah, you got to be more skeptical of these new tools until they're really proven. And using new tools can sometimes be mistakes, right? So very good points you made. So thanks for sharing that, Chris. Now I'd like to go to our final panelist. Please put questions and comments in the chat. Vittal, you get to ask the first question of the panelists when we're finished, but let me go back and I'll share my screen and go to the next slide if I can. Oops, I forgot there. Harvey's contact. And by the way, these recordings will be posted and the slides will be posted after the event. So Paul, over to you. Please introduce yourself and give us your point of view on all this healthcare transformation.
Sure. So I'm Paul Griffin. I'm a faculty member with Vittal in industrial engineering. I also serve as director of Penn State's Consortium on Substance Use and Addiction. My interests are in modeling healthcare systems and health analytics. And a lot of it has been to help for informing public health. So you can go to the next slide. There are obviously a number of issues with healthcare. It's reactive, it's hospital-centric, it's focused on disease. And where we want it to be, of course, is rather to be proactive, person-centered, focus on health and wellness, recognizing that our health and wellness only depends a small amount on the delivery of healthcare. And so when we talk about health and wellness, it's much broader than delivery. And so, of course, the question is, how do we get there? And there are lots of exciting work that's being done in areas of connected care, evidence-based care, engaged care, in addition to AI. Next slide. So just as in a couple of examples, Dr. DeFlitch mentioned the medical record as being a real barrier. So physicians spending way more time in front of a computer than they are in front of a patient. AI clearly has an opportunity to help to improve that process in terms of being able to provide information in real time, to be able to link to past data. But there are a number of challenges I'll mention on the next slide for trying to achieve that. In terms of connected care, I'm sorry, let me just say a couple of things on the previous slide. In terms of connected care, really having the opportunity through technology to have better coordinated care if I'm an individual that has asthma or diabetes, to really help me in real time to make those decisions as opposed to being a randomized controlled trial of one. The key thing also is how do we better engage in care? And this is some of the things that Dr. Castro mentioned, that this is such an important part for us. And new technologies give us the opportunity to do that. And the thing I'm really excited about as well is how we think about evidence-based care. So traditionally, we've relied on RCTs, which are the gold standard. They're important, but there are numerous problems with them. With so much data, there are new techniques that are being developed in causal modeling and causal inference in micro RCTs to generate much more quickly evidence for the individual. Next slide. But there are a number of challenges Dr. Kripilani mentioned the whole issue of agency. So we have this disconnect between patient, provider, and payer that leads to a number of issues. We have issues with regard to cost, unlike other industries, where when we have new advancements that typically lead to increased productivity and lower cost, we tend to get increases in cost in healthcare when new technologies are introduced. We also, as Dr. Kripilani mentioned this as well, there's a whole issue about how do we deal with trust. We saw that really exacerbated during COVID. And we're having to deal with things like nursing shortages and other types of shortages, the fact that rural health is broken. And so there are a number of issues that need to be overcome for these new technologies and advances to actually be successful. So I'll stop now.
Great. Thank you, Paul. I'm going to stop sharing, and now we can have the conversation that we're all looking forward to. And yeah, I agree. We have mountains of material that we've all been studying and practicing in this area. So it's hard to distill it into 5 minutes, but I really do want to thank you all for observing that time. I'm starting to see questions pop up in the chat, but Vittal, you get the honor of the first question for the panelist, and I'll cut the discussion off when I think we've reached a good quiescent point and start putting questions in from the chat. So Vittal, over to you.
Thanks, Jim. So my first question is related to trust and associated issue of regulation. Healthcare is very tightly regulated. So what sort of challenges do you foresee or have already experienced when we introduce something as relatively new and sort of be even a suspect in some minds, like AI, into this mix? So it's a general question. Anybody wants to take it on is welcome.
Yeah, I'll start since I'm like kind of practically in the middle of all that right now, as sort of the steward of all of our data at our health system. There's a lot of rules, right? And a lot of the federal regulations around the data and who has it, who owns it. You know, you can get down to the philosophical question about patient owned versus health system owned and protection. I think one of the things that we're seeing inside of this is to say what technologies you put into it and against it, and where does that data sit as you're doing the work in these engines, right? So you know, if you have something that's running on a server in another country, is that okay because the data is here, but that, you know, it's being driven in a different environment? You know, who oversees that activity? And that's real experience, right? And then the one that I think is we're going to struggle a little bit with is who then owns the generative data, right? Because generative AI exists, and, you know, people can take a look at it, and you're creating new data. So, okay, is that data the system who was working with the patient? Is it the patients? Is it the company who you know, used that tool to generate it? I think we don't know the answers, and it's like, you know, back to the pen thing. We're trying to answer that question with people who wrote laws with pen and paper, right? And so we still see that in simple electronic records and how we manage that activity with rules that are, you know, in Pennsylvania in the 80s, right? And so you have to be able to balance that. I think that in the entrepreneurial spirit and in the spirit of sort of academic freedom, this is where we play with it in data that is not, it can be de-identified and protected in a certain way. So there are tools, both AI and non-AI tools, that can help you do that. And that's where I think we're going to learn in those spaces. It's going to happen quickly, but it's going to be about data ownership and security.
Yeah, I think if I may, I'll add to that. Chris, I agree with you completely. I don't think we have all the answers. And I think there's a fine line here between data that's personal to an individual versus data that's somewhat anonymized, where you're drawing inferences, but not absolute conclusions, right? And you said it earlier in your opening, which is healthcare is deeply personal. And I love the paper and pen analogy because I still use a paper and pen myself as well. But more importantly, what that really does is AI and AI solutions, in my view, it's not a case of they're going to replace the care that gets provided. They're going to enhance the care that gets provided, right? Because there's a limited amount of time that a physician, provider, I'll say a provider, doesn't have to be a physician, but a provider spends with the patient. And everything you can do to enhance that and get the most out of that is kind of where I think the value ultimately lies, right? It's not that it's a replacement. And yeah, you'll have examples of robots and all this other stuff, but that's not mainstream, right? I think mainstream is how do you enhance the experience with more knowledge, more insight, so you can arrive to whether a diagnosis or whatever it is faster.
Yep.
Right. And we'll figure it out. And I think we will push the boundaries of legislation. And frankly, I think we're going to push the boundaries of our own comfort with how much of our data gets shared in places we've never seen before. But that's life. That's happening in social media today.
No doubt, no doubts, and we've got to allow ourselves to do it, right? And we've got to, you know, folks like Harvey and others who are out there just kind of going nuts with it, right? Just why not? Let's go. Come on, let's go. Well, we need that. We need that in an academic sense. We need that in an entrepreneurial sense. But we've got to. I think it'll be a consumer driven activity, and I think there's going to be some generational differences that are associated with it. But yeah, it's a neat time. It's an exciting time to be able to, you know, even think about these things, let alone be able to actually accomplish some of the things you can conceive of.
Yeah. Yeah. Hey, folks, if I may, I have to break away for something urgent, so Jim, I'll just slip away. So
Okay, Neil.
Well, thanks for having us.
Be safe, sir.
Thanks. Take care.
And yeah, and for folks that want to stay involved, I'm putting some links in the blog post about this. There's a survey. I'm hoping some of the participants take the survey. I also put a link into Harvey did a pre-event blog post where he talked about culture change and trust. I don't know if you want to weigh in on Vittal's question before we shift over to the next question.
Yeah, I'm just going to quickly say, you know, at the end of the day, all of this is going to take a cultural change. You know, if I wear my doctor hat and I see the world a certain way, and then Joe Schmo comes with these fancy meta glasses and says this thing has ChatGPT in it and it's telling you stuff, and then I'm going to change the workflow and I'm going to force all the doctors to do it, they're not going to like it. But if I'm teaching the doctors and saying, hey, this is why it works and this is why I can get better accuracy and maybe this is a better workflow, then I'm more likely to do it, but I need to change the culture. And so one of the things I always stress about is I can invent the limousine, but if the culture is not ready for that limousine, it's not going to happen. And so I always tell startup companies, it's like, I love your idea, but I think we need to break this down into baby steps because if you promote this at a hospital, you're going to get a no. So it goes back to the culture.
Yeah.
And I would just add one quick comment. I mean, I think one of the questions, do we just need to blow up the EMR and start over? Because this sort of incremental change is going to be really hard.
Whoa, I'm going to do a little celebratory Zoom thing on that one. That's
Yeah.
that's
Well, you know, I think, you know, so you want to get nuts, right? We really got to think about the different provisioning of care, right? So it's traditionally, you know, you go back in the day, right? It was about a primary care physician meeting with you as a patient in your house, right? Or them coming to your house related to it. And it sort of grew up from there. And if you look at the medical record, you know, Larry Weed created the medical record 100 years ago based upon something he said, I think we should do it this way. And it just got adopted in that way, right? And all of a sudden, we built a whole industry of payment around the fact that some dude says we're going to do it like this, right? And so it's all this sort of, you know, house of cards. But the reality is, you know, I would love to be able to provide care for patients and not have to worry about, you know, billing for something or documenting these things in a certain way such that they're not going to stop me from pre-authorizing a surgery that I really should have, right? But we're in that game right now. And this gets back to what's driving this, right? Consumerism is going to drive change in a way that healthcare industry can't. Healthcare industry is beholden to the payment model structures, right? And so that's how we have to think about things. And as engineers or wannabe engineers like me, I'd say, okay, how can we re-engineer the system in a way using these tools that makes sense for our patients first and then supports these other things? So, you know, when you run out of nurses or you run out of primary care physicians or you run out of hospital beds, right? You know, we don't go looking to put more people in the hospital because that's what's driving the financial engine of the system. We look to say, how can we keep people healthy? And that's what's driving, you know, the societal costs, not just not just the cost of the systems. And until we get to that point, we're going to struggle. But innovative people, disruptors, new technologies, they're the ones that get us there in a certain way. But I'm down with it. If I never have to document anything in an electronic record again in my life, man, I'd be a happy camper.
Thank you. Thank you, Chris. Hey, I want to go to Gary Metcalf's comment. And Gary, I don't know if you want to go on video and ask it yourself, or I can just read it in a minute. But before, there's Gary. Good. You can stay tuned. You're on deck. I just want to mention one thing that Harvey and I collaborated on that I'm going to share my screen again. And one of the things that Harvey and I like to do is create these diagrams of who we follow as influencers. And there's Harvey right there in the middle, one of the people, and these are some of the others. And you can see we have the optimists, Chris, you'll love that, the realists. Maybe we should nudge Harvey over into the optimist side a little bit more. But the doers that are out there trying to create the books and the code, and then people who are just wise and have a lot of experience, who are the knowers. So I really urge people trying to keep up with accelerated change to create one of these diagrams about who they follow and how they try to keep up. And Harvey, sorry I had to cut this from your slide deck because you had so many cool slides, but I did work it in. Now, Gary, over to you and monetization. Oh my gosh. What are you thinking about there, Gary?
Well, let me expand it even just a little bit, Jim. It really gets to the drivers of how the technology is being shaped right now, right? So you've got, right now, kind of the standard for us clients out in the world is you go to WebMD to try to get information about your own condition, and then you deal with the hospital about electronic records, which are just a freaking nightmare in many small places. And, so you're kind of trying to collapse a lot of the current technologies, but then where it's going, it's some of the ownership models of healthcare networks and systems. Doctors don't own their practices, they work for big investors at kind of every level, and these systems are really expensive. So, my question really is there a place where there's essentially a feedback loop of patients starting to help refine for their own welfare, their good, the systems as they develop?
Anybody want to jump in on that? Wow. And I wonder, Gary, if it should be local, right? I mean, Chris said people taking care of people. Well, yeah, the people you see locally
healthcare at some point comes down to care. It's the treatment that drives the medical part, the treatment, the reimbursement, but care is what gets people well in the end.
It's interesting in healthcare decision making. How people do it is fascinating, right? You would trust your neighbor or your uncle or somebody who saw that person before. They're not an expert in any way, shape, or form. They just had a pleasant interaction with some dude at one point, right? Now all of a sudden that's driving the business there. One of the things you see really in group practice, and I think it was Harvey who started talking about, sort of the team approach here, is that are the people who have experience in that disease or that thing may be more valuable to you than the physician or I'm a physician, I can say, right? The physician or the nurse or the surgeon or whatever, right? And so, you'll see these studies out there occasionally in group therapies where people with like diseases come together in a community and they all get better together because they're changing habits. They're changing approaches. They didn't think of something that somebody else thought of related to it. And in an exponential technical way, that's kind of what AI does for you, right? It goes out to your communities, it thinks about those things and maybe presents it to you in a way that you can understand it and make sense. So I think as we sort of twist this around to the AI helping you with healthcare or with provisioning, you're developing that sort of community. Now, you got to trust that community, right? That they could be selling you some Kool-Aid, right? And so you got to be thinking about that again, which is why you want to be knowledgeable. But I think it's the consumerization of it and the like people coming together and maybe a few experts inside of there who have some experience with this. I think in some parts gonna help. It's not going to be changed by the government. It's not going to be changed by health systems. It's not going to be changed by changing the monetary structure of how things go. as Paul said, incremental, right? It's not transformation.
Yeah, and I'm gonna jump in and say some weird stuff that I heard and read. They're proposing to, as we know, they're selling our information. That's why Facebook, stock went down because they weren't allowed to do that. And so some theories out there are saying, why not let the patient sell their own data? And so I know that sounds weird, but you would put it in blockchain, and then the patient has the ability to sell that data. Obviously, it's not their name, but at least the information. Going to the little chat bots and stuff like that, or the communities rather, I have read some companies where they literally put some bots that are scavenging around the entire internet and looking for the different communities for that particular disease. And then they're taking that data. So if person X in a community of, say, Zepbound, that is a drug to lose weight, is saying, oh man, I always get X. And then they go through all the forum and they're like, wow, this is not in our studies, but in these forums it's coming out. And then they're able to train a model to say, you know what, the AI is saying to take a look out for this. And so why am I even mentioning all that? It's because I see that as another tool, not necessarily replacing me, not necessarily that can't be manipulated, but I see it as another way of saying, you know what, the community is saying this. Instead of it saying, this is what Facebook said, it's actually going through and looking at all the forums and giving it to me. And that's a lot different. So.
Yeah, it's well said, Harvey. I think, the other thing is you talked, Jim, I think you talked at the beginning about, the computer and the processing power being free and fast, right? Well, maybe not free, but cheaper and faster than it was before. Imagine we all have our genome that's mapped, and we not only look at like what we're doing with snippets of things that you can do with very specific groups of drugs and pharmacogenomics. We actually truly map everybody, right? And then you have it down to the specific nucleotide. And all of a sudden, that you couldn't even conceive of historically. Now we're going to have computing power that's going to allow us to do that. And if we, make it reasonably affordable to do that, and we share our data, imagine what we could discover. Because I think we're going to discover all kind of different things. You don't have to worry about a person picking up a pattern. Person can pick up the specific, DNA link and its association to whatever environmental factors.
Yeah, great discussion. Yeah, I just put a couple things in the Slack, including Gary, your LinkedIn. I hope our panelists connect with you and you connect with them, because your question about the drivers and monetization is a really good one. And you can look at the positive and the negative, like all innovations, right? And Irene Ng, who's one of our ISSIP ambassadors, she's got a startup company that's building this individuals on their own data and have AI capabilities to help them monetize it as they choose. And I'm also thinking, Paul, about, I haven't uploaded your video, pre-event video yet, Paul, I'm behind, but I will get that uploaded because we had 30-minute interview with you discussing some of these things. And I want to come to this point you made about rural healthcare, because you know what? There's a lot of rural places that don't have doctors, that don't have nurses, that are just, and telehealth isn't cutting it. So Paul, could I ask you to elaborate a bit on that? Just a couple of your comments.
Yeah, I mean, it's
Here's-
just broken, and it's hard to see for a number of reasons. It's hard to see the financial way to bring it back, unless that's another thing we need to blow up. And telehealth. I mean, part of the issue is the cherry picking of services to be provided. Telehealth can't deliver babies. And so now, there's no OBGYN services in rural areas. And so there are clearly models, hub and spoke models and things that people are looking at. But in order for those to work, it comes down to a lot to something Chris mentioned earlier, which is, the financial and sort of economic payment for this has to fundamentally be changed for it to for this to work. And it's just a tremendous and sad issue that is a really important thing to us to address. I wish I could say, here's what we need to do to fix it. I can't say that, but it is a really challenging problem. And technologies that we thought would help really aren't. I mean, there have been studies that have shown actually telehealth has hurt rural health. The consolidation that has occurred in healthcare as well has been another thing that's driven up prices and also hurt the provision of rural health. And so the trends aren't good. It looks like it's going to get worse.
Yeah. Anybody else want to jump in on that rural health thing? I've got another question I've got, but
Yeah, Paul, I think that's, as we, and maybe it's a little self-serving, but, Penn State Health and Penn State University as a rural university, land grant organization that really has a responsibility towards taking care of the entire Commonwealth, really focuses in on that independent of the finances. And so you're right. Us studying some of those things, us applying some of these newer technologies and access there, maybe having, the local trusted leader being that person who can, use the technologies and drive it. I think, there are some ways to have that. Again, we've got our Commonwealth campuses all over the state, and there's an opportunity and infrastructure that already exists, at least in Pennsylvania and probably in other states too, that I think, again, this is where industry and universities, I think, can do some partnership along with entrepreneurial folks to develop something that in a model that looks completely different.
Great. Yeah. The next thing, anybody else on the rural healthcare? I'd like to, this is something that came up in a discussion. It's in our survey. We say, what are the things that you're seeing that are most promising, that are the biggest needs, where there's like stressed patients, stressed healthcare providers, cognitive overloaded people. And Harvey, in the pre-event interview with you, you mentioned that loneliness is one of these things that the Surgeon General or some group in the US has said, this is our number one enemy, is loneliness. Wow, if that is the number one problem in healthcare, is loneliness, where do you see, does AI play a role in helping with this, or could it? What did you say? Can you remind me?
The skinny on that, it's a slippery slope. And I'm gonna say there's patients out there that tell me, you know what, I personally don't want to go to my doctor. I want to go see my bot, that I can say things that I won't tell a human, and I'm not going to be judged. And so there is a section there where I do see AI helping. Now, will it replace? No. Do I agree with people saying, hey, I have an AI girlfriend? And I think I've read somewhere that they're like actually trying to marry one. And I'm like, okay, this is getting crazy. Now, with that said, can it help? Yeah. Case in point, elderly, they need companionship. They're opting now to get robot AI bots, so that way it reminds them of their medicine. If they fall, the bot is calling 911. They need physical touch. So I know that's not the real animal, but they can't really take care of an animal. So then the animal can charge itself, and quote unquote, I call it animal. So and it is helping with that companionship. And on the biometrics for a doctor, it's helping us because it can analyze the patient and say, okay, their voice is saying this, they're saying that. And so I do see that as a play. Now, will it be replacement? No, but it's kind of weird question or problem rather.
But it is, yeah, it is an area that's of grave concern, where maybe there's some stuff here, and I have seen they're in the journals of service research that if you're having an interaction where the person you're interacting with can get judgy on you, sometimes in certain situations the bots are actually preferred, where you have to disclose stuff and talk it through. So maybe there is something there.
Although it is interesting how judgy they can get at some, they can go down rabbit holes at time as well. So one needs to be careful about what they're trained on.
Let's remember what Chris said, and I'm totally with you, Chris. This is early stage for a lot of this stuff, and it makes a lot of mistakes. And for every victory, you can find 10 failures, and vice versa, depending on who you're talking with. Hey, we have about 12 minutes left, and I'm just scrolling through the chat to see if I missed any questions or comments from anybody. So I do see Harvey put in a couple things. Chris, you put in a comment about Gary's question. Gary, we've spoken to you. I hope I haven't missed anybody. Steve Kwan, you privately put in about Irene's work on monetizing data and owning the data. Oh, Vittal has another question. So Vittal, Ask your cobot question. That's a good one.
Yeah, so in manufacturing, we are seeing fairly good success in terms of cobots, and they've become products, which means some lawyers are actually signed off on it. They work with humans in things like light assembly that I've seen. There's actually an experiment done for welding a Humvee chassis, experienced welders versus inexperienced welder with cobot, and the inexperienced welder with cobot came ahead. So this is going to Harvey's equation. It's actually inequality has been shown to be true, at least in one instance. So what would these cobots in healthcare look like? For example, to help a nurse who is, say pushing 60, 72 or whatever, or a surgeon for that matter, a very experienced neurosurgeon, maybe wanting to try on robotic surgery, things like that. What are your thoughts? This is Wild West possibly.
I'm the least knowledgeable on the panel, but I would say, one area where I think it would be helpful, you think about physical therapy or actually moving patients, that's a difficult and often dangerous process, particularly as we all are getting heavier. And so I think that's certainly an area is with regard to patient sort of assistance.
Yeah, I'll jump in. I know the first day that the Apple Vision Pro came out, a neurosurgeon, Dr. Robert Mason did a neurosurgery case with the Apple Vision Pro on. Case in point, if I had this experience from the doctor's side, being able to have a digital twin, I'm going to pick on my friend here, Chris, and being able to see his anatomy and be able to plan my whole case before even touching him. In med school, we call it see one, do one, teach one. So I just see it once and boom, I'm doing it. But what if I had VR and I could do it 100 times before I touch Chris? On the opposite side, if now Chris is a patient, imagine me explaining to him X, Y, Z disease and saying, hey, I need you to take your meds. You're like, whatever. But if I put some VR glasses on him and I'm like, hey, let's look at your heart and let's go through it and let me show you what's going on and let me graphically explain. Now he's like, holy cow, now I see why I got to take my meds. And so this is how I think these gadgets will help. My example to your point, Vittal, when you were talking about the nursing, I really do believe this is going to augment this. If I'm going to retire because my back's out and I can't lift a patient and maybe I'm too heavy myself, well, hell, if I have a robot that can work 24/7 and it's not going to ask for overtime and use it to help me lift patients, then I'm like, you know what? Here's my assistant. Yeah, I'll keep working if I don't have to lift. And so I really think that's the goal here. We're going to help our healthcare workforce to do things. And anyway, so that's my skinny on that one.
Yeah, I'm with you. I think that we can't lose the human touch, right? Only humans can do human touch. Although, some of those bots and things can help a little bit, but there's no difference, between there. You can replace knowledge. You can't replace necessarily expertise. So if I'm seeing an undifferentiated patient in the emergency department and I go down this path over here to the right, I could be completely wrong as opposed to going down the path to the left, right? And so, you do this all the time. You think about it. So experts in expert systems probably don't need as much assistance as you do with the other folks in a specific model. Now, you put me in the OR doing neurosurgery. Yeah, I'm a doctor, but I haven't, maybe I drilled a couple of heads or something, but I've not done anything like that ever, right? Could I learn how to do it? Probably, right? Could I have the technical expertise to do it as a human with this expert next to me? So I think about in these terms, think about medical education, think about nursing education, think about how we're supporting these folks with this extra support right next to them that they're not afraid to ask, that they're supporting it themselves. And, if something's going a little bit askew, they kind of tap you on your shoulder and say, what about that? So that's where I see those assistants in the learning environment. And I don't mean to say that experts can't be learners, because at the beginning of the talk we talked about learning about AI and learning about this. You've got to become knowledgeable in those areas to be able to ask the right questions.
Can I ask a follow-up question, Jim? Do we have a minute?
Yes, please. We do. We have 6 minutes.
So going back to a project that I did several years ago with a bunch of colleagues in our College of Nursing. My collaborator was a nurse. She had like 30 plus years of experience as nurse, and she said, Vittal, we used to take hours filling up, Medicare forms. Experienced nurse, to me, it's sort of misapplication of her expertise to fill forms. Is that a lower hanging fruit that we can target for improving productivity in care delivery? Chris, Harvey, any of you?
I think in the short term, yes, but we're asking the wrong questions about the system itself, right? This is the
Mandate
steps
system.
that we're taking, right? It's the iterative type approach. That's how we ended up with what we have with, 2 or 3 health IT systems that are basically owning all of our data, right? It's because we've done this incrementalism activities. And so, yes, could we do that to automate this? Of course we could, but we're accepting the fact that we have to fill out, a 17-page form to have something done. Maybe there's something wrong with that at its core. And so I think, using the technology to learn about why do I have to go through this? I mean, the pre-authorization for spine surgery is a perfect example, and people use it all the time, right? The box check inside the insurance company says, how long did they go to physical therapy? What kind of medications did they try? And I had a case, earlier this week with one of our orthopedists who said they needed a redo total hip replacement. And the first question that the insurance company asks is, well, did they go through physical therapy? Well, anybody who knows anything about this, physical therapy is going to harm that patient more than there. But they're just following the direction. I think that it's a core change in what we're doing for people, not using technology to help out the barriers to care.
Absolutely.
Do you think the healthcare industry and the discipline is amenable to this change, Chris, or is it still too early?
No, it's not. In a practical sense, that's why we have these conversations in these rooms, and we're not having them in the boardrooms of the health systems. It's such a change. It's such a mindset adjustment that we've really got to rely on our patients to assist in the consumerization of these technologies to show how it helps. And that's why I really enjoy talking about this sort of stuff, is because I can make certain changes as a executive in a health system, or as a physician, or as a health systems researcher. But there's many, many more patients out there who realize what really needs to be done. And if we can get the tools in their hands with some knowledge, maybe they'll really change things. I think we're a little stuck in the old ways of thinking. I mean, so Paul and I have been talking about, well, actually the 3 of us have been talking about, using industrial engineering principles to help out healthcare for, 15, 20 years. It's finally here. We're finally using them in a way that makes sense, but it took 15, 20 years to do that, right? We don't have time, nor do we have the dollars to be able to do that in the time frame here. And so, that sense of urgency, let's get the patients what they need, independent if they can afford it or not.
So we've got about 2 minutes left before I have to wrap and thank everyone. So if someone has a burning question that they haven't asked in the chat, or they have asked in the chat that I haven't seen, or a panelist for each other, this is the time. No burning questions.
So I'd like to ask Chris a question, if that's okay.
Yes, please.
So from your perspective, what do you see as the key question to address in healthcare?
The key question to address in healthcare? Geez. That's just a loaded question, isn't it? Since this is an AI talk and an engineering thing, I'm going to say that it's the empowerment of the patient with the right technologies.
Okay.
So if we can have things like ChatGPT or some other AI tools that allows me to get better care, that's what I want. And it's not about wearables. It's not about, what's my heart rate every minute of every day. I don't need to know that sort of stuff. What I need to know is, am I going to be healthy enough to get to my daughter's wedding, right? Or, can I can I have my neighbor watch my dog so I can go out for a run, right? Stuff that I want to do, right? And it's those type of sort of practical things that I think the technology can allow us to do. It's sorry to talk about it like this, but healthcare, if you think about it, is very episodic, right? You go see a doctor, that's 1 hour of your year. You go, maybe you have a blood test, that's 30 minutes of your year. Guess what? You're living your life the rest of the year, right? It's not about those interval times when you're looking for or willing to access care. It's about all that other time in between. And there's technology out there that allows us to be able to live healthier. And if we need the expertise, whether it's a chat bot or Chris DeFlitch in the emergency department, then we do it that way. But it's sort of partners in health, I guess, if you will.
Well put.
Great. It's a great summation right there. I love it. So let's end there. Thank you all so much for the panelists, Vittal, my co-host, creator of this series, and everyone who joined, and all those who will watch the recording from the ISSIP community for, I'm sure, months and months to come. This has been a fantastic discussion. So thank you all. And I'll be in
Thank
touch
you
with
all. Thanks, Jim, for leading this effort, and all the panelists, Chris, Paul, and Sunil, and Harvey, who had to leave. So we'll be in touch with you guys. Thank you.
Thanks all. Bye for now.